Tonight on Nation to Nation, harassment and intimidation on the waters off Nova Scotia. The Mi'kmaq fight for their right to fish as non-Mi'kmaq cut their lobster traps.
Like they surrounded us already, and they were following us while we were dropping our pots. But on our way back in, I could see all my buoys just floating. They already cut them all off.
This has been going on for over a month. Just this week, one Mi'kmaq fisher had his boat torched.
And conservation is not a concern here. So there's a lot of rhetoric that sort of happens and not a lot of understanding either about the treaty right or the fact that this isn't some free-for-all.
Somehow, non-Mi'kmaq fishers haven't heard the news yet, that only the Mi'kmaq have the right to fish the waters off Nova Scotia.
Most fishermen aren't aware of our treaty rights. They're not aware of the Marshall decision. They're not aware of our Mi'kmaq values.
Hello, I'm Todd Lamoran, and welcome to the season premiere of Nation to Nation. And boy, do we have a show for you. For several weeks, non-Mi'kmaq fishers have been harassing and trying to intimidate Mi'kmaq on and off the waters of Nova Scotia. It's all in an attempt to stop them from fishing for lobster. The non-Mi'kmaq have gone as far as cutting lobster traps, and earlier this week, a Mi'kmaq fisher had his boat torched under suspicious circumstances, according to the RCMP. But what many seem to be overlooking is the Mi'kmaq have a right to fish for a moderate livelihood, while everyone else has a privilege. The Supreme Court of Canada upheld this fact back in 1999. But here we are 21 years later, and the Mi'kmaq are still facing abuse to earn a living. Join us to say more is a Mi'kmaq fisher who has been in the thick of it, Terrence Augustine. Thank you for coming on Nation to Nation, Mr. Augustine.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
First off, what the heck is going on? Why are these non-Mi'kmaq harassing you and other fishers?
Well, we're out trying to establish our treaty rights, right? And they're not with it. So we're here exercising our treaty rights, trying to get our moderate livelihood plan like kicked off. Our band actually has a plan that they sent DFO, and they've been sending it for quite some time now, and they've been getting ignored. So finally the band took it upon themselves to issue licenses to us and let us go fish for ourselves.
Of course, the non-Mi'kmaq community is a bit put off by that. We had a reporter on your boat for a day, and what happened when you went out there? I mean, I've seen some of the footage, but tell us what happened.
Well, the very first day when they issued the licenses, I went out and I loaded my boat up. We had 50 traps, right, compared to their 375 in their commercial season. And with the 50 traps, I went out, I set my gear, and on my way back in, like they surrounded us already, and they were following us while we were dropping our pots. But on our way back in, I could see all my buoys just floating. They already cut them all off. And then they spent the night dragging for the gear and getting rid of it all.
Did you ever feel for your safety when this was all going on?
I do in a way, but like DFO was out there, Coast Guard was out there, but they were not helping us. They weren't keeping them away from us, and they were actually coming pretty close to us. And we're just trying to establish our rights, right? And they just kept hounding us and yelling at us and everything.
Is there anything to report right now about that? Like this week, since Monday, have things been the same, or have things improved, would you say?
Well, I heard now that like I was gone for about a week now. I had a personal matter I had to take care of in New Brunswick, so I was gone for a week. And when I got back, everybody was gone. So yeah, I guess it's getting better. My traps were still there.
Do you think that? Do you think you're going to see the day when there's going to be progress and you don't have to go through this harassment, and that you can just go out and do what is your right to do?
I'm hoping there is a day, but I don't know when that's going to be. I'm hoping my children or their children's children will have a day that they can go out and fish and not be bothered by anybody.
How do you feel that the harassment could get any worse at this point, or is it just going to be just what's happening out on the water? You know, when you go back to your community, back on land, so to speak, do you run into problems there as well?
When we get back on land, we have places that won't serve us. Like, we go out and we spend money here because we're not from here. We have to get places to live. Some people are up in hotel rooms, living there, right? Just to come down and fish. And they go out, try to get something to eat, and they say, no, we don't allow you here to eat. We don't allow you to do this. We've had fuel companies tell us that they're not allowed to fuel us. Like, there's such a big pressure from the commercial fishermen that it's like they run the show down here.
Oh my goodness, that seems like a lot of hoops that you have to jump through and a lot of things, roadblocks in your way. I mean, how do you keep doing this, going out on a boat and trying to make a moderate livelihood when you're facing this?
I try to find different ways of doing stuff. Sometimes, even just to get fuel, I have to sometimes get my jugs of like jerry cans and get my boys to go fill them up. We have to make 5-6 trips sometimes, and it's not right. Like, we could get a truck in, and they could fill our boat up, right? But that don't happen sometimes. But now we found one place that will fuel us.
In the face of all this, Mr. Augustina, why do you still do it? I mean, it sounds like you just easily give up and not have this headache.
We're here to fight for our rights. Like, I want my children to be able to go out and fish whenever they want and have the right to make a modern livelihood, right? So it's not for us, it's for the future that's coming up.
That sounds great, and I hope you can have that livelihood for them, for the next generations. Mr. Augustine, I want to thank you for speaking to me.
Thank you very much for having me.
After the break, we speak to Jamie Batiste, a Mi'kmaq Member of Parliament whose riding is also in Nova Scotia. Welcome back. Nearly 1 year ago, Jamie Batiste was elected as the first Mi'kmaq Member of Parliament. He successfully ran under the Liberal Party banner for a riding in Cape Breton, Nova Scotia. Batiste currently lives on the Eskasoni First Nation, where a year ago a Mi'kmaq-owned boat was vandalized under suspicious circumstances, but thought to be connected with the owner's efforts to earn a moderate livelihood from fishing. To talk more about that issue and others, I'm now joined by Jamie Batiste. Welcome to Nation to Nation.
Thank you for having me, Todd.
Now, considering what's happening in Nova Scotia over the dispute of what is a Mi'kmaq right to a moderate livelihood, how do you reconcile your duties as an MP with being a Mi'kmaq citizen?
I think it's an important one. I think that what we've learned is that there's not enough awareness out there of treaty rights. There's not enough awareness of the shared history that we have, not only in Nova Scotia, in Canada. My role before I was a Member of Parliament was the treaty education lead for Nova Scotia, where I did my best to go to schools, to businesses, to government, and talk about our shared history and how we move forward together. And I think the important thing here is having a Mi'kmaq MP to be able to share within government and within Ottawa some of the rights that we have, and to give a balanced perspective of the history in Canada.
What do you say about the harassment that Mi'kmaq fishers, I talked about the person in your community you're living in right now, but the ones in southern Nova Scotia, what they're facing right now, what do you say to them?
You know, I went down there personally because I had constituents down there who said, you know, you need to come down here. And one of the things I did was I went down there, but I wanted to ensure that I was talking to everyone. So I talked to the Mi'kmaq fishers, I talked to the RCMP, and I really got a sense of what was going on down there. And what I really feel is that we need a collaborative approach to this discussion. I do believe that there's enough lobster out there, there's enough fish out there for the Mi'kmaq to be able to exercise a moderate livelihood right. And but it has to be in collaboration with those fishermen. And unfortunately, right now, those fishermen aren't aware of our treaty rights. They're not aware of the Marshall decision. They're not aware of our Mi'kmaq values of native conservation. And I think these are the important things that we need to share.
You talked about collaboration and that there may not be enough knowledge, especially with the area we're talking about in southern Nova Scotia. But it's been 21 years since the Marshall decision. So why do Mi'kmaq fishers have to go through what they're going through to get a lasting solution?
Because reconciliation is a long journey, and you know, for years, I can remember my neighbor, Grand Captain Alec Denny, in the 1960s, took our treaties to a lawyer in Sydney, and at that time, he was told that our treaties weren't worth the paper they were written on. It was only through advocacy over the years in 1986 where our treaties were affirmed in the court. But in 1990, we went a step further with the Marshall decision. And so one of the things that we're faced with is how to create education around our rights, how to create awareness. And as elected officials, we can only go as far as the electorate let us go. But if you look back 20 years from now, and my father was one of the keynote speakers at the Assembly of First Nations Fisheries Conference after Marshall, and what he was calling for was the Mi'kmaq and the Maliseet to work together to establish an Atlantic Fisheries Authority. And so 20 years ago, we're looking at this situation. We never would have envisioned that we would have 2 Mi'kmaq senators and an elected member of parliament to be able to create awareness and create influence within Ottawa. And I think we're moving along. You know, I was part of the Assembly of Nova Scotia Chiefs negotiating team back 8 years ago under Stephen Harper, where there was no mandate to negotiate this fishery. Now our government has made this a priority, you know, and negotiations are taking time, of course, but that's why the Mi'kmaq senators and I got together and said, we're going to put some options on the table, but we do so by talking to the fishing industry. We did so by talking to the Mi'kmaq fishermen themselves, by talking to the ministers, and talking to the Mi'kmaq leadership and trying to find solutions moving forward.
It sounds like you're suggesting that you're actually at the table as negotiations are going on between all the parties and the DFO Minister, Bernadette Jordan?
Well, I feel that I'm an asset, and I've been helping just because of my background, not only in negotiation, but my background in law. And I taught this at Cape Breton University for many years. I talked to students about this. And so where I feel my role is, my first and foremost role is always to represent the people of Sydney, Victoria. But as a Mi'kmaq person within that house, and the only First Nations within our government, I do my best to try to shine a light on giving a balanced approach. And you know, that's where I believe my role has been effective, is in creating understanding and creating awareness and being able to tell people about the journey that where we've gotten to from 20 years ago, but even before that.
We, of course, spoke to a fisher down in Saulnerville. He talked to us about the harassment that they face, and he talked to us about he's hoping for a solution, maybe not for him, but he's talking about for his children. Are we really going to have to wait another generation, though, to stop seeing these disputes on the water?
I wish I knew the answer of how long Mi'kmaq or First Nations have to wait to get reconciliation. But I do believe it's a journey and not a destination. We're making steps. But, you know, the day after what was going on in Saulnerville, I spoke to the fishermen. I asked them to go on a conference call with me. I wanted to hear for myself what was going on. And the thing is that we really need to create more awareness, and we really need to share more perspectives of what the Mi'kmaq have achieved and what the Mi'kmaq values are, but what the fisheries has meant to us. And the biggest thing that I remind people that this isn't just about money and jobs. This is about a practice, a way of life, transmission of knowledge from generation to generation that is based on the hunting, based on the fishing. And it's not just about livelihood. It's about continuing to practice that right. And I think our government has come a long way in the past 3 weeks of really understanding and listening to what the Mi'kmaq chiefs are asking for and what the Mi'kmaq community is asking for. Because we have to realize in a lot of these communities, they're in deplorable situations. I know I live in Eskasoni First Nation where they have children in poverty rates of up to 75%, but they've always had this right and it's been recognized since 1999. Unfortunately, that information isn't out there. But what we need to do as government is find approaches that get people out of poverty, that allows Mi'kmaq to work, but also ensures that the sustainability of the industry is part of this. And this is where the challenge lies with how do we move forward together. And that's where I really feel the treaty education in Nova Scotia, where I was part of for 5 years, was really doing a lot to educate Nova Scotians about our treaties, about reconciliation, about the history. And I really feel that if anyone takes a look at YouTube and takes 10 minutes to understand the Mi'kmaq history from the Treaty Education Nova Scotia on YouTube, I think that would go a long way in helping people understand. And when people understand the history, when people understand treaties, it allows elected officials like myself to help move the bar even further.
Well, you know what, I wanted to talk to you about other issues. I ran out of time. I hope you can come on Nation to Nation again. And want to thank you for speaking to me now, though.
Absolutely, Todd. Thanks for having me. If any other issues that you'd like me to have on, I'm more than happy to talk about them.
After the break, longtime APTN news reporter Tristan Roach will help put this latest fishing dispute into more perspective. Welcome back. Tristan Roach is a veteran reporter for APTN News. She currently produces stories for APTN Investigates and has been reporting on fishing disputes in Atlantic Canada for many years. She's here now to give us some insight into how we got to this point. Trina, welcome to Nation.
Thanks, Todd.
Now, you said quite recently that the conflict we're seeing today isn't a surprise. Why is that?
This has been a long time coming, really. I mean, 21 years. And when I started in APTN, with APTN back in 2000, 2001, I was up, the first stories I did were in Burnt Church. The Marshall decision had upheld treaty rights, the Mi'kmaq went fishing, and then all hell broke loose. We call it the Lobster Wars, the Burnt Church crisis. And I remember standing on wharves at that time and hearing non-Mi'kmaq commercial fishermen say they're going to ruin the lobster stocks and just all this sort of fear and concern about what the Mi'kmaq were doing. And here we are 21 years later, and you're hearing that same sort of battle cry from commercial fishermen in southwest Nova Scotia. They're going to ruin the lobster stocks, the reason for the season. You sort of hear the same rationale against the Mi'kmaq fishery that you did then. And over that time, because DFO has not implemented the Marshall decision, and in fact, this is the first time that's sort of an official kickoff of a moderate livelihood fishery. But Mi'kmaq have been doing this over the last 21 years and getting charged by DFO. So that sends a message to everyone involved that what the Mi'kmaq are doing is wrong somehow, that they shouldn't be out there. And so that sort of has given the commercial fishermen, sort of this sense of being right, that, oh yeah, they're not supposed to be doing that's not right or it's not fair. And when I did a documentary last year for APTN Investigates marking the 20th anniversary of the Marshall decision, and I spent a lot of time on those wharves, and I could hear the frustration and the anger from commercial non-Mi'kmaq fishermen, feeling like it's not fair, that there's something, that the Mi'kmaq shouldn't be able to make money when they can't. And so I wasn't surprised at all when we saw events unfold this fall and late summer.
Trina, is this just a result that non-Mi'kmaq fishers just don't know the treaties, that there's a right there that the Mi'kmaq have, or, why isn't that message, I suppose, getting across?
it's a right that exists, and the non-Mi'kmaq fishers, it's a privilege, right? And so the right that exists, there's not an understanding that that right is enshrined in these treaties, that it's constitutional. There's sort of this sense too, I think, you know, that the right is regulated, and yes, DFO can regulate the right. The Supreme Court outlined that in its Marshall decision, and it's actually in a rare clarification of the decision, which we call Marshall 2. It sort of issued a second decision because there was so much pushback from the industry. And so this Marshall 2 sort of said, well, the right can be regulated, but only for really good reason. Like DFO has to say why. So it has to be safety, or the big one is conservation. And conservation is not a concern here. So there's a lot of rhetoric that sort of happens and not a lot of understanding either about the treaty right or the fact that this isn't some free-for-all, that the Mi'kmaq have a management plan in place that is ensuring conservation, and that what the Mi'kmaq are doing is a drop in the bucket compared to the commercial fishery. And so I think there's a lack of understanding, and that's on DFO maybe to have that kind of dialogue, and that should have been happening over the last 2 decades, and it doesn't seem like it has been happening.
Why have successive governments failed to arrive at a lasting solution? Because it's not just a liberal, you know, we had a succession of liberal and conservative governments over the past 21 years.
Well, you know, the initial reaction to the Marshall decision in 1999 was to slide the Mi'kmaq into the existing commercial fishery. So, you know, there was fishing deals, and I don't know, it was like over $600 million for boats and training and gear. And that's great, right? That has provided bands with a way to make money, own source revenues. But it's not moderate livelihood. And so that, when you think about it this way, like Donald Marshall Jr., and I've said this before, if he was alive today, because he went fishing, he caught and sold eels without a license out of DFO's regulated season, and then was charged with illegal fishing. And his case, that's the Marshall decision said no, he has a right to do that. And over the last 20 years, what we've seen is that people are getting charged for fishing the same way he did. So if Donald Marshall Jr. was alive today and did the same thing, he could be charged with illegal fishing. And so you know, that commercial access didn't address the actual treaty right and what individual Mi'kmaq men and women can do. And so the negotiations that are happening like now, because the commercial access, even DFO said, yeah, we know this isn't implementing Marshall, but it's sort of our short-term fix. And then the issue of moderate livelihood just sort of has sat undefined for 21 years. DFO now has like new rounds of negotiations going on. 3 bands have signed, but most have rejected like these deals because they don't address the right. Like what they do is they actually ask you to quiet your right. The Mi'kmaq, if they sign on, they get the money, but they agree to that they won't sue DFO and that they will fish under the existing regime. That they will not, that they'll quiet their rights, that they won't assert treaty rights.
Trina, I want to thank you for putting a lot of this into perspective, and I hope our audience understands it a lot more. Thank you for doing this.
Thanks.
That's it
Todd.
for our first show of the new season. If you missed any part of it, you can check out our podcasts. Go to aptnnews.ca/podcast. I'm Todd Lamoran, and as we go into the long weekend, I hope everyone stays safe and remains healthy. Thanks for watching.